The crystal towers of Vex Prime reached high into the purple sky, their surfaces glowing with the light of 3 suns. Inside the largest tower, beings from across the galaxy gathered around a massive circular table. This was the Galactic Council, where the most powerful species made decisions that affected trillions of lives. High Arbiter Zixthal stood at the center of the room. His crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. For 50,000 years, his people had ruled this part of the galaxy. They had seen countless species rise and fall. Today, they faced what many called the human problem. Fellow council members, Zixthal began, his voice ringing like distant bells. We must discuss the rapid expansion of the human species. Around the table, various aliens shifted in their seats. Admiral Kethvar clicked his mandibles in annoyance. His insect-like face showed clear disgust when anyone mentioned humans. His people, the Void Stalkers, had built their reputation on crushing primitive species before they became threats. These humans, Kethvar said, his voice sharp and cutting, they spread through space like a plague. In just 200 years, they have claimed 47 star systems. They build colonies faster than we can track them. Scholar Nimara floated above her chair, her energy-based form pulsing with soft blue light. As one of the Eternal Archive, she had witnessed the rise and fall of dozens of galactic civilizations. Their growth rate is unusual, she admitted, but they are still primitive. Their technology barely qualifies them as a spacefaring species. Zixthal nodded his agreement. Exactly. They use crude fusion drives and basic energy weapons. Their ships are slow and clumsy compared to ours. Yet somehow they continued to expand into territories we had marked for future development. The holographic display in the center of the table showed human space. Red dots marked their colonies, spreading outward from a small blue world they called Earth. To the council members, it looked like a disease spreading through healthy tissue. What do we know about their military strength? Asked General Thokran, whose rock-like people had conquered dozens of worlds through brute force. Kethvar pulled up tactical data. They have perhaps 10,000 ships total. Most are cargo vessels and colony transports. Their military fleet numbers fewer than 3,000 ships. My smallest battle group could destroy their entire navy in a week. Then why haven't we acted yet? Thokran demanded. Because, Zixthal said carefully, we received an unusual communication 3 days ago. From the Watchers. A hush fell over the room. The Watchers were an ancient species that rarely spoke to anyone. They lived in the dark spaces between star systems and had not attended a council meeting in over 1,000 years. When they spoke, wise beings listened. Nimara's form brightened with curiosity. What did they say? Zixthal activated another hologram. The image showed a being wrapped in shadow and starlight. When it spoke, its voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Children of Terra walk paths that echo through the void. The Watcher had said, their domain extends beyond what your sensors perceive. Approach with wisdom, not conquest. The quiet dark remembers everything. After the message ended, several council members laughed. Kethavar's clicking sounded like broken glass. Cryptic nonsense from a dying species. The Watchers have been hiding in their dark corners for millennia. They fear change. I agree, said Zixthal. The Watchers speak in riddles because they have forgotten how to speak plainly. They want us to fear shadows and whispers. General Thokran slammed his massive fist on the table. We have crushed dozens of upstart species. These humans are no different. They have primitive technology and primitive thinking. We should act before they spread further. But what if the Watchers know something we don't? Nimara asked softly. Kethvar turned his compound eyes toward her. Scholar, you have access to the greatest archives in the galaxy. Have you found anything unusual about humans? Nimara's form dimmed slightly. Their psychological profiles are strange. They seem to think differently than most species, but their technology is clearly inferior to ours. Then we have our answer, Zixthal declared. The humans must be contained. We cannot allow a primitive species to claim territories that rightfully belong to advanced civilizations. I propose immediate action, Kethvar said, standing to his full height. A containment fleet to surround human space. We give them one chance to surrender peacefully. If they refuse, we demonstrate the price of defying the galactic order. The vote was swift and unanimous. Every council member agreed that humanity posed a threat that must be stopped. The Watcher's warning was dismissed as the paranoid ramblings of an irrelevant species. As the meeting ended, The council members filed out, satisfied with their decision. They spoke confidently about teaching these young humans their place in the galactic hierarchy. Some even joked about how quickly the humans would surrender once they saw real military power. Only Nimara hesitated at the chamber doors. Something about the human data files troubled her, though she couldn't say what. Their expansion patterns didn't quite make sense. Their colony location seemed random, as if they were following some logic that her people couldn't understand. But her concerns were drowned out by the confident voices of her colleagues. The hegemony would handle this problem like they had handled all the others, with overwhelming force and crushing efficiency. Outside the crystal towers, the three suns of Vex Prime began to set. The sky turned deep purple, then black. In that darkness, something stirred. Something that had been watching the council meeting from spaces between spaces. Something that remembered other young species who had faced the arrogance of established powers. The Watcher who had sent the warning drifted through dimensions that the council's sensors couldn't detect. It had tried to prevent what was coming, but the cycle would continue as it always had. The established powers would attack. The new ones would respond, and reality itself would shift to accommodate the change. In the quiet spaces between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the spaces of normal existence, the Watcher whispered a prayer for the souls that would soon cease to exist. Not the humans. They would survive this, as their kind always had. But for the proud civilizations that had just signed their own death warrants with their arrogance, the warning had been given. The choice had been made. Now came the consequences. Far away, in a small blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star, humans went about their daily lives. They tended their gardens, raised their children, and dreamed their dreams. They seemed so normal, so harmless, so perfectly ordinary. But in the spaces between their thoughts, in the quiet moments between their words, something vast and patient watched the galaxy with ancient eyes. Something that remembered when the universe was young and the first wars between realities had been fought. The humans knew what was coming. They had always known. And they were ready. 6 months after the council meeting, Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Void Render. Through the massive viewscreen, he could see his fleet stretched across space like a deadly constellation, 500 ships of the hegemony's finest warriors, armed with weapons that could turn planets into cosmic dust. "Status report," Kethvar commanded, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "All ships report ready." "Admiral," his tactical officer replied, "we have surrounded the human system they call New Geneva. Our sensors show 23 human vessels in the area, mostly cargo ships and small patrol craft." Kethvar laughed, a sound like breaking metal. 23 ships against 500. These humans must be either very brave or very stupid. The fleet had traveled for months to reach this frontier system. New Geneva was one of humanity's newest colonies, far from Earth and poorly defended. It would serve as the perfect demonstration of hegemony power. Once the humans saw what happened here, they would surrender their entire territory without a fight. "Open communications to all human vessels and colonies," Kethvar ordered. The communication officer, a young hegemony warrior eager to prove himself, activated the broadcast systems. "Channel open, Admiral." Kethvar straightened his armored form and spoke with the authority of 50,000 years of galactic dominance. "Humans of New Geneva, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Hegemony Containment Fleet. By order of the Galactic Council, your species has been found guilty of unauthorized expansion and territorial violations. You will immediately cease all colonial activities and submit to Council authority. Your ships will lower their shields and prepare to be boarded. You have 1 hour to comply." The bridge fell silent as they waited for the expected response. Kethvar imagined the panic spreading through the human colonies. Their primitive leaders would be desperately trying to contact Earth, begging for instructions that would never come in time. After several minutes, a response came through. The voice was calm, professional, and completely without fear. "Hegemony Fleet, this is Defense Coordinator Sarah Chen speaking for the New Geneva colonies. Your message has been received and understood. You have 24 hours to withdraw from our territory. This is your only warning." The bridge erupted in shocked chittering and clicking. Several officers turned to stare at their admiral, waiting for his reaction. Kethvar himself stood frozen for a moment, his compound eyes wide with disbelief. Did they just give us an ultimatum?" the tactical officer asked. Kethvar's laugh this time was filled with genuine amusement rather than satisfaction. They think 23 cargo ships can threaten 500 warships. Their stupidity is almost charming. Should we respond, Admiral? The communications officer asked. No, Kethvar decided. Let them have their moment of defiance. In 24 hours, we will show them what real power looks like. Begin positioning the fleet for optimal strike coverage. I want to be able to destroy every human installation in this system within minutes. As the hegemony ships moved into attack formation, something strange began happening. The first sign was small. A sensor glitch here, a navigation error there. Nothing that seemed important at the time. Lieutenant Zekfor was monitoring long-range sensors when he noticed the first anomaly. Admiral, I'm getting some unusual readings from Sector 7. What kind of readings? Kethvar asked, only half interested. Energy signatures that don't match any known technology. And sir, some of our scout ships are reporting navigational difficulties. Kethvar turned his attention to the tactical display. 3 red dots showed hegemony scout ships that had been sent to investigate what appeared to be empty space near the system's edge. As he watched, their signals began to fade. Boost communications to the scout ships, he ordered. The communications officer worked frantically at his console. Sir, I'm trying, but their signals are strange. It's like they're getting farther away, but our sensors show them in the same position. Could be some kind of jamming technology, the tactical officer suggested. The humans might have hidden defensive systems. Kethvar nodded. That made sense. Primitive species often relied on tricks and deception when they couldn't match superior firepower. Send a full squadron to investigate. Have them report every 15 minutes. But as the hours passed, the strange incidents multiplied. Ships would report seeing things that weren't there on sensors. Others would find themselves in completely different positions than their navigation systems indicated. Several crews complained of vivid dreams that felt more real than waking life. Most disturbing were the reports from engineering teams. Hegemony technology that had worked perfectly for thousands of years began showing minor malfunctions. Nothing serious, just small glitches that made no sense. Weapons that took an extra second to charge. Shields that flickered for no reason. Computer systems that showed data that couldn't be there. Admiral, the sensor operator called out, his voice shaking slightly. The 3 scout ships from earlier. They're gone. Gone? What do you mean gone? I mean they're not there anymore, sir. No debris, no energy signatures, no trace they ever existed. But the logs show they were just reporting in normally and then nothing. Kethvar stared at the empty space where his ships had been. This was impossible. Ships didn't just vanish without leaving some trace. Even if they were destroyed by antimatter weapons, there would be radiation signatures. Could they have jumped to hyperspace? He asked. No, sir. Hyperspace drives leave distinctive energy trails. There's nothing. It's like they just stopped existing. For the first time since arriving at New Geneva, Kethvar felt a small chill of uncertainty. But he pushed it aside. The hegemony had conquered half the galaxy by never backing down from a fight. Whatever tricks the humans were using, they would not save them from superior firepower. Continue preparations for the attack, he commanded. Double the watch on all ships. Report any unusual readings immediately. As the 24-hour deadline approached, the strange incidents continued. More ships reported navigation problems. Several crews requested permission to return to base, claiming their vessels were acting wrong in ways they couldn't explain. The ship's medical officer reported an increase in stress-related disorders among the crew, but Kethvar remained confident. In a few hours, the humans would see what happened to species that defied the galactic order. His weapons could crack planets. His shields could withstand the fury of dying stars. Whatever games the humans were playing, they would end when real battle began. The defense coordinator's voice came through one final time as the deadline expired. Hegemony Fleet, your time is up. You chose to ignore our warning. What happens next is on your heads. Kethvar activated his fleet communications. All ships, this is Admiral Kethvar. Begin the attack. Show these primitives the price of defying the hegemony. 500 ships opened fire at once. The space around New Geneva lit up with enough destructive energy to sterilize a dozen worlds. Plasma beams, antimatter torpedoes, and gravitational warheads streaked toward human installations. And then reality began to break. The first sign was the weapons themselves. Beams that should have struck their targets instead curved through empty space, hitting nothing. Missiles that had been fired at stationary targets found themselves somehow behind their own ships. Energy weapons that had never missed in 10,000 years of warfare seemed to be firing into a universe that wasn't quite the same one they had aimed at. "What's happening to our weapons?" Kethvar demanded. Before anyone could answer, the human counterattack began. Ships appeared where there had been empty space moments before, but they didn't arrive like normal vessels. They seemed to slide into existence from angles that shouldn't exist, and when they fired back, the universe itself seemed to help them. The first human ship materialized directly above Kethvar's flagship, impossible close for something that size. It hadn't used any kind of drive system that hegemony sensors could detect. One moment there was empty space, the next moment a sleek vessel hung there like it had always existed. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered, staring at the tactical display. "Nothing that large can just appear without us detecting the approach." His weapons officer was already working frantically at his controls. "Targeting the human vessel, Admiral. Firing main plasma cannons." The massive energy beams lanced out toward the human ship. For a split second, Kethvar smiled as he watched certain destruction streak toward his enemy. Then his smile died as the beams passed harmlessly through the target, as if it were made of light and shadow instead of metal and energy. "Direct hit," the weapons officer reported, confusion clear in his voice. "But the target shows no damage." "Sir, it's like our weapons aren't even touching it." "That's because you're not firing at the right ship," came a new voice over the communication system. It was calm, almost gentle, with a slight accent Kethvar didn't recognize. "You're firing at where we were. We're attacking from where we are." Before anyone could ask what that meant, the human ship fired back. But the weapon that hit the void render wasn't like anything in Kethvar's experience. Instead of plasma or energy, it felt like reality itself was being rewritten around his ship. Suddenly, his flagship's mighty shields weren't protecting against weapons. They were trying to hold back the basic forces that kept matter together. Warning alarms screamed as the ship's hull began to vibrate at the atomic level. "Damage report," Kethvar shouted over the noise. "Sir, this doesn't make sense," the engineering officer replied, his voice high with panic. "Our shields are failing, but not from weapon impact. It's like the fundamental forces holding our armor together are being changed." Across the fleet, similar reports came flooding in. Hegemony ships found themselves fighting battles that followed no known rules of physics. Human vessels would vanish from one location and attack from another, as if space itself was folding to let them through. When hegemony weapons tried to track their targets, they found themselves firing at empty coordinates while the human ships struck from impossible angles. Captain Yexmar of the destroyer, Bloodtide, watched in horror as a human vessel seemed to attack his ship from inside his own shields. "How are they inside our defensive perimeter?" he demanded. "Sir, they're not inside our shields," his sensor operator replied, voice shaking. "According to our instruments, they're attacking from parallel to our position. The readings don't make sense. It's like they're here and not here at the same time." The human weapons weren't just destroying ships. They were changing the rules that let those ships exist. Some hegemony vessels found their own weapons turned against them, as if the universe had decided they were pointing in the wrong direction. Others discovered that their armor was trying to protect them from gravity, while their engines were suddenly vulnerable to light. "Admiral," came a panicked transmission from the cruiser Starbreaker. "Our navigation systems say we're moving backward through time. Our weapons are firing before we pull the triggers." "How is this possible?" Kethvar had no answer. In 50 years of military service, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans weren't just using superior technology. They were somehow making reality work differently around their ships. A new human voice joined the communications channel, this one younger and more excited. "Sarah, these guys really don't understand dimensional warfare at all. They're trying to fight us in just 3 dimensions. The first voice, Sarah, replied with what sounded like mild amusement. "Try not to show off too much, Marcus. They're probably very confused right now." "What are you?" Kethvar found himself asking over the open channel. There was a pause before Sarah answered. "We're human, Admiral, just like we've always been. The question is, what are you going to do now that you understand what that really means?" Understanding came slowly, like ice forming in Kethvar's veins. The humans weren't using impossible technology. They were doing impossible things because for them, those things weren't impossible. They existed in more dimensions than his sensors could detect. They could step between different versions of reality like walking between rooms. "Fall back," he ordered his fleet. "All ships, tactical withdrawal. Emergency hyperspace jump on my mark." But even retreat proved impossible. When his ships tried to enter hyperspace, they found the dimensions they needed to access were already occupied by human vessels. Some of his captains reported that their hyperspace drives were trying to jump them into realities where they had never been built. The battle, if it could even be called a battle, lasted only 3 hours. When it ended, fewer than 50 of Kethvar's 500 ships remained functional. The rest hadn't been destroyed in any conventional sense. They had been edited out of local reality, written out of the equations that defined existence in this region of space. Kethvar's own flagship drifted powerless through space, its crew alive, but changed. Many of them sat staring at nothing, whispering the same phrase over and over in languages they didn't know. The quiet dark remembers everything. The human voice, Sarah, spoke one final time before the survivors were allowed to leave. "Admiral, when you report back to your council, please give them a message from Earth. We tried to avoid this. We've been sharing the galaxy peacefully for decades, staying mostly in dimensions you couldn't detect. We only showed ourselves because your expansion was beginning to threaten species we've sworn to protect." What are you?" Kethvar asked again, his voice broken. "We're the children of a world that exists in many realities at once," Sarah replied. "We've learned to live in the spaces between dimensions, in the quiet places where thought becomes reality. We tried to warn your council through the Watchers, but you chose to see us as a threat instead of potential friends." One of the undamaged human ships moved closer to the void render. Kethvar could see it clearly now, sleek, organic-looking, and somehow more real than the space around it. "Your people can survive this," Sarah continued. "But only if you learn to see the universe as it really is, instead of the small part your sensors can detect. Go back to your council, tell them what you've seen, help them understand that reality is much larger than they believe." The human ships began to fade from normal space, sliding back into whatever dimensions they called home. As they disappeared, the strange effects around the hegemony fleet began to normalize. Physics returned to its usual rules. Sensors started making sense again, but the crew members who had been touched by the human weapons remained changed. They spoke of seeing through the walls of reality, of understanding that everything they had believed about the universe was just a tiny fragment of something infinitely larger. As his damaged fleet limped back toward hegemony space, Kethvar found himself thinking about the Watcher's warning. Their domain extends beyond what your sensors perceive. Now he understood what that meant. The humans didn't just control 47 star systems. They controlled 47 star systems in this reality, plus countless more in realities that existed alongside, above, and between the dimensions the hegemony knew about. Their true territory was vast beyond imagination, and they had been restraining themselves. The few surviving tactical recordings showed glimpses of what the humans could really do, ships that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. Weapons that could target not just matter and energy, but the fundamental laws that governed how matter and energy worked. The ability to step between dimensions like climbing stairs. Most terrifying of all was the realization that came as Kethvar studied the battle recordings. The humans had never used their full capabilities. They had fought with restraint, like adults being careful not to hurt children who had picked a fight. They could have simply erased his entire fleet from existence. Instead, they had sent most of his ships home to carry word of what they had encountered. The message was clear. This was a warning, not a war. As the battered hegemony fleet jumped into hyperspace, carrying news of their defeat back to the council, they left behind a region of space forever changed. Reality itself seemed more flexible there, as if the human presence had taught it new possibilities. In the quiet spaces between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the boundaries of normal existence, something vast and patient watched them go, something that remembered when the universe was young and the first children of convergence worlds had learned to step between realities. The humans had revealed themselves now. There would be no going back to the careful dance of hidden expansion and subtle influence. Whatever came next would reshape the galaxy forever. Scholar Nimara floated in the deepest vault of the Eternal Archive, surrounded by memory crystals that held the history of the galaxy. Her energy form pulsed with desperate intensity as she searched through records that hadn't been accessed in millions of years. The news from Admiral Kethvar had shaken the Council to its core, and she needed answers. The surviving hegemony ships had brought back impossible stories. Weapons that rewrote the laws of physics, ships that existed in multiple realities at once, humans who spoke of dimensions that Council science said couldn't exist. Most disturbing were the crew members who had been somehow changed by contact with human technology. They spoke in riddles about reality being far larger than anyone imagined. Computer, cross-reference all records containing mentions of convergence worlds or dimensional warfare. Nimara commanded. Warning, the archive system replied in its ancient voice. Records found match security classification. Cosmic threat level. Access requires full Council authorization. Nimara's form flickered with surprise. In all her centuries of research, she had never encountered files with that classification level. Override with Scholar Prime authority. This is a galactic emergency. The vault around her transformed as hidden storage systems activated. Memory crystals emerged from spaces that hadn't opened in geological ages. The information they contained was so old that the civilizations who had recorded it were now just legends. The first file made her form dim with shock. Historical record, the Architect Extinction event, approximately 3.7 million years ago. Cause, contact with species designation, children of the void. Note, all physical evidence of the architects has been removed from baseline reality. Only quantum echoes remain in parallel dimensions. Nimara quickly accessed the next file. Historical record, the First Empire collapse, approximately 1.2 million years ago. Final transmission received. The children walk between worlds. Reality bends to their will. We should have listened to the warnings. Empire status edited from existence. Timeline stability minimal. Her hands shook as she opened the third file. Historical record. The Star Shepherds vanishing, approximately 400,000 years ago. Last known activity. Attempted containment of dimensional anomaly near Earth-class world. Result complete temporal deletion. Species never existed in any accessible timeline. The pattern was clear and terrifying. 3 times in galactic history, advanced civilizations had encountered species like humanity. Each time, those who tried to contain or control these beings had been systematically erased from reality itself. Computer, display all references to convergence worlds. New data streams filled the space around her. Technical documents written in languages that predated known writing systems. Scientific theories that used mathematical concepts the current galaxy hadn't discovered. And maps. Star charts showing worlds that existed at the intersection of multiple realities. Convergence worlds form naturally when dimensional barriers become thin. She read aloud from one ancient file. Species that evolve on such worlds develop the ability to perceive and interact with parallel realities. They do not expand through normal space. They expand through infinite versions of space. Another file contained what appeared to be a warning written by the Watchers themselves. Dated over 2 million years ago. The children of convergence worlds are not conquerors in any sense we understand. They are gardeners of reality itself. They tend the infinite possibilities that exist in quantum space. When threatened, they do not destroy, they edit. They rewrite the fundamental equations that allow their enemies to exist. Nimara felt a chill that went deeper than her energy-based physiology should have allowed. The humans hadn't been expanding into Council territory. They had been expanding into Council territory's infinite parallel versions. The 47 star systems the Council tracked were just the tip of a dimensional iceberg, vast beyond comprehension. Computer, current status of human expansion. New displays showed recent sensor data from across the galaxy. What she saw made no sense according to normal physics. Human ships and colonies were appearing in star systems that had been thoroughly explored and found empty. They weren't arriving from normal space. They were stepping sideways from dimensions the Council couldn't detect. A colony on a world that scans had shown to be uninhabitable. Mining operations in asteroid fields that previous surveys had found to be solid rock. Trade routes through empty space that somehow connected distant systems in impossible ways. The humans hadn't been hiding their expansion. They had been politely limiting it to realities where it wouldn't interfere with Council species. But the containment attempt had forced them to abandon that restraint. Scholar Nimara, came a transmission from the Council chambers. Report to emergency session immediately. Priority Alpha. She gathered the most crucial files and rushed to the meeting. The council chamber was in chaos when she arrived. Representatives from dozens of species argued loudly, their voices creating a cacophony of panic and confusion. High Arbiter Zixthal called for order as Nim-Ara took her position. Scholar, we need answers. What are we facing? The end of everything we thought we knew about reality, she replied, her voice heavy with the weight of what she had discovered. The humans are not a threat in any conventional sense. They are something far more fundamental. She activated the chamber's display system and showed the assembled representatives what she had found. The ancient records, the pattern of extinctions, the true nature of convergence worlds, all of it laid out in undeniable detail. The Watchers tried to warn us, she continued, but we interpreted their message as a threat assessment instead of what it really was, a plea for wisdom. General Thokran slammed his massive fist on the table. Then we fight. We gather every ship, every weapon, every ally. We show these children of convergence what happens when they threaten the galactic order. You don't understand, Imara said desperately. They're not threatening the galactic order. They are the galactic order. They exist in the spaces between our understanding of reality. When the previous civilizations tried to fight them, they weren't destroyed in battle. They were removed from existence itself. Admiral Kethvar, attending the meeting via holographic projection from his medical bay, spoke up. His voice was hollow, changed by what he had experienced. She's right. We didn't lose a battle. We were allowed to survive as messengers. I watched 500 ships of the line become irrelevant, not destroyed, just made irrelevant to reality. What does that mean? Zixthal demanded. It means they could have erased us completely, Kethvar replied. Instead, they chose to send us home to deliver their message. We are only alive because they decided we should be. As if summoned by their discussion, every communication system in the chamber activated simultaneously. The voice that emerged was calm, patient, and unmistakably human. Council members, this is Dr. Sarah Chen speaking for Earth's domain. We need to talk. Security systems throughout the chamber went into emergency mode, trying to trace the source of the transmission. Every scanner showed the same result. The signal was coming from everywhere and nowhere, from dimensions their equipment couldn't detect. We've been monitoring your discussion, Dr. Chen continued. Scholar Nim-Ara has found the correct historical records. You now understand what convergence worlds are and what species like us represent. Zixthal found his voice. What do you want from us? The same thing we've always wanted, Dr. Chen replied. Peaceful coexistence. We've been sharing the galaxy with you for decades, staying mostly in dimensions you couldn't perceive. We only revealed ourselves because your containment attempt forced our hand. The previous civilizations, Nim-Ara said, her voice shaking. The architects, the First Empire, the Star Shepherds, what happened to them? There was a pause before Dr. Chen answered. They made the same choice your Admiral Kethvar almost made. They saw our capabilities as a threat to be eliminated, rather than a phenomenon to be understood. They gathered vast fleets and weapons specifically designed to destroy convergent species. And you erased them from existence, General Thokran accused. Reality erased them, Dr. Chen corrected gently. When you try to destroy beings who exist across multiple dimensions, those dimensions defend themselves. The universe has ways of protecting the balance between realities. New displays activated around the chamber, showing the current state of human expansion. Colonies on thousands of worlds across hundreds of realities. Trade networks that connected distant galaxies through dimensional shortcuts. Civilizations that existed purely in quantum space. Tending gardens of pure possibility. This is our true domain, Dr. Chen explained. What you see in your reality is just the smallest fraction of our presence. We could expand into your dimension completely, but we choose not to. We prefer to grow in the infinite spaces between your worlds. Then why reveal yourselves now? Zixthal asked. Because you're ready, Dr. Chen replied. Your species have reached the point where they can begin to understand reality as it truly is. We want to help you take the next step in your evolution. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans weren't offering conquest or submission. They were offering transcendence, but not everyone was ready to accept that gift. The final council session was held on neutral ground, a space station that orbited nothing, floating in the void between star systems. Representatives from 43 species gathered in the circular chamber, their faces showing every emotion from wonder to terror to desperate anger. Dr. Sarah Chen walked into the chamber without an escort, without weapons, and without any visible protection. She looked completely ordinary, a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and kind eyes. The only unusual thing about her was the way reality seemed slightly more vivid in her presence, as if her very existence made everything around her more real. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said, taking the seat that had been prepared for her at the center of the circle. Her voice carried easily through the chamber without amplification. "I know this is difficult for all of you." High Arbiter. Zixthal leaned forward, his crystalline form catching the station's lights. "Dr. Chen, we've studied the records Scholar Nimara discovered. We understand what your species represents. What we don't understand is what you want from us." Sarah smiled gently. "We want the same thing we've always wanted, to share the galaxy in peace. But now that you know what we really are, we can be more honest about how that sharing works." She gestured, and the chamber's holographic systems activated without anyone operating them. Images filled the space around them, views of human colonies that existed in dimensions the Council had never imagined, cities that floated in quantum space, farms that grew probability itself, children playing games with the fundamental forces of reality. "This is our true civilization," Sarah explained. "We exist across thousands of realities simultaneously. What you see in your dimension is just the part of us that chooses to manifest in baseline space-time." General Thokran's rock-like features twisted with suspicion. "Why show us this? Why reveal your true capabilities?" "Because hiding was becoming impossible," Sarah replied. "Your expansion was beginning to affect realities where we have established populations. We needed you to understand what you were dealing with before someone got hurt." Admiral Keithvar, still recovering from his encounter with human capabilities, spoke up. "The previous civilizations, the ones that were erased from existence, they tried to fight you?" "They tried to contain us," Sarah corrected. "They saw our expansion into parallel realities as a threat to their territorial claims. They developed weapons specifically designed to collapse dimensional barriers and force us into baseline reality, where they could destroy us." "And what happened to them?" Scholar Nimara asked, though she already knew the answer. Sarah's expression became sad. "The universe protected itself. When you try to collapse the barriers between realities, you risk destroying the fundamental structure that allows existence itself. Reality edited them out to preserve the greater whole." She stood and walked to the center of the chamber. As she moved, the space around her seemed to expand, showing glimpses of the infinite dimensions where humanity dwelt. "We're offering you a choice," she said, her voice echoing with harmonics that seemed to come from other realities. "You can accept us as partners in exploring the greater universe, or you can try to contain us as previous civilizations did." "And if we choose containment?" Zixthal asked. "Then you'll share the fate of the architects, the First Empire, and the Star Shepherds," Sarah replied without malice. "Not because we want to hurt you, but because reality itself will protect the balance between dimensions." "That sounds like a threat," General Thokran growled. "It's not a threat," Sarah said firmly. "It's an explanation of natural law. If you try to destroy beings who exist across multiple realities, those realities will defend themselves. We can't stop that process any more than you can stop gravity." The chamber erupted in desperate discussion. Some representatives argued for immediate surrender. Others demanded they gather every available weapon and fight regardless of the consequences. A few suggested trying to negotiate some kind of limited coexistence. Through it all, Sarah waited patiently. When the arguments finally died down, she spoke again. "I understand your fear. Your entire civilization is built on the assumption that reality works in specific ways. Learning that those assumptions are incomplete is terrifying, but it's also an opportunity." New images filled the chamber, council species living alongside humans in expanded realities, exploring dimensions that contained wonders beyond imagination, building civilizations that spanned infinite possibilities. "This is what partnership looks like," Sarah explained. We can teach you to perceive the greater universe. We can show you how to expand beyond the limitations of baseline reality. You don't have to give up what you are. You just have to be willing to become more. For several hours, the council debated. Some species, led by scholar Nimara's people, argued for accepting the human offer. They saw the opportunity to transcend their current limitations and explore realities beyond their imagination. But others, driven by pride and fear, refused to accept that their understanding of the universe was so fundamentally flawed. General Thokran's people rallied around the idea of fighting regardless of the consequences. Admiral Kethvar's hegemony, still stinging from their defeat, demanded revenge. We will not bow to primitives, Zixthal finally declared. The hegemony has ruled this galaxy for 50,000 years. We will not hand over that authority to newcomers no matter what tricks they can perform with reality. Sarah nodded sadly. I was hoping you would choose differently, but I understand. Pride is a difficult thing to surrender. She stood to leave, but paused at the chamber doors. Those who wish to explore partnership with us are welcome. We'll establish diplomatic contact with any species that chooses coexistence, for those who choose containment. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The division among council species was immediate. Roughly half chose to establish peaceful relations with humanity, recognizing the futility of fighting beings who could exist across infinite realities. These species quickly found themselves benefiting from human guidance, gaining access to technologies and territories they had never imagined possible. But the others, led by the hegemony and its allies, chose war. The final battle lasted exactly 17 minutes. It wasn't fought in normal space, but across dozens of realities simultaneously. The Allied fleets had gathered every weapon they could find: reality warping devices, dimensional bombs, tools designed to collapse the barriers between parallel universes. They never got the chance to use them. The moment they activated their most dangerous weapons, reality responded. Space-time itself rejected their presence. They didn't die in explosions of fire and energy. They simply ceased to have ever existed. Their ships became empty space. Their worlds became uninhabited. Their histories became gaps in galactic records that no one could quite remember. The surviving species found themselves unable to recall exactly who they had been fighting alongside. They knew there had been allies, but couldn't remember their names or what they looked like. The only evidence of the vanished civilizations was a persistent feeling that something important had been forgotten. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the garden she had planted on the rebuilt council world, tending flowers that bloomed across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each plant represented a different species that had chosen partnership over conflict, their unique beauty adding to the infinite tapestry of the garden. The integration is proceeding well, reported Dr. Marcus Webb, materializing from a parallel reality where he had been helping a newly allied species understand dimensional physics. The Eternal Archive people are particularly excited about accessing our historical records from alternate timelines. Sarah nodded, touching a flower that existed in 7 realities at once. Scholar Nimara has been very helpful in easing the transition for her people. They're natural researchers. They'll adapt quickly to expanded reality. Any word from the Watchers? Marcus asked. They're coming out of hiding, Sarah replied with a smile. It seems they're ready to take a more active role in galactic guidance now that we're here to help share the burden. As if summoned by their conversation, a figure wrapped in starlight and shadow materialized among the garden paths. The Watcher moved with the fluid grace of beings who existed primarily outside normal space-time. Welcome to the community of shepherds, the Watcher said, its voice carrying harmonics from distant realities. We have waited long for others to join us in tending the garden of infinite possibilities. Sarah bowed respectfully. We're honored by the recognition. Our people have much to learn about guiding galactic development. You have already learned the most important lesson, the Watcher replied. Power without wisdom leads to extinction. Wisdom with restraint leads to transcendence. In the months that followed, the galaxy transformed. Species that had chosen partnership with humanity found themselves exploring realities they had never dreamed existed. Trade flowed through dimensional corridors that connected distant regions of space. Conflicts were mediated by beings who could literally see all sides of every issue. The few remaining aggressive species learned to moderate their behavior when they realized they were now sharing the galaxy with civilizations that existed across infinite realities.